So our session is Agile Data Solutions, Lessons from Organization that get 10x impact from the data. They will clarify what the 10x means. Whether it's productivity, efficiency, there will be some clarification around that. So a few housekeeping details. This session is recorded, and the recording will be available part of the symposium proceedings. There will be Q&A at the end of the session, so please raise your hand. I'll bring the microphone over to you. Virtual audience, please enter your questions via Hua app. This session is a hybrid session. It's a combination of presentation and panel discussions. Panelists include folks from Manulife, MIT, and Optum. Our primary speaker is Mohammed Aaser. He is Chief Data Officer for Domo. And he helps customers enable modern data experiences that deliver significant business impact. And he was, prior to Domo, he was a CDO for McKinsey. So welcome, Mohammed.
Yeah, good mic up. Thank you, Lakshmi. So I want to start with the story, a tale of two companies. Both in the financial services industry, multi-billion-dollar organizations doing a customer and marketing transformation. And they want to build a single source of truth, bring in their customer data, bring in their digital data, bring in data from their different email platforms, customer platforms, and so on, and even their marketing data. They also have a great amount of financial data. How much account holdings do they have? What are all the transactions? What are the accounts that they have? And so on. And then finally, they want to be able to create segments of those customers and then take those segments and map customer journeys and then do tactics, A/B campaigns, and then see what the impact is, right? To ultimately drive more results, financial results for their organization. So company A, very much an IT-led organization, and they have a very large and specialized team. They're investing tens of millions of dollars. They've got specialized tools for every part of the data value chain, and they have a 3-year integration roadmap. On the second half, you have company B, a much smaller team, business-led, CMO really driving the vision for the solution. They have integrated tooling, weekly sprints, and their focus really is on learning and iterating. And the results are quite staggering. And this is an adapted true life story, really. Company A is 1.5 years in to their transformation journey. They're behind. In fact, they're at a point where they haven't yet delivered any value, but the architects have stamped it and they said, this is enterprise grade. This is an enterprise grade solution. We're doing all the right stuff. And not only that, they're tackling all these other issues. They're migrating from Teradata to Teradata to Snowflake. They're adopting Salesforce CDP. They're building a bunch of data science models, or they're getting all the right pieces in place, but they've invested tens of millions and they haven't seen anything yet. Company B, on the other hand, the CMO is already using these segments. They're already deploying to market. They're testing and iterating. They've actually seen meaningful revenue impact. They grew from a team of 3 or 4 folks to now 6+ that are focused on this solution. And they've only invested a few $1 million. And so this is a question I've always been struggling with in my mind. Why is it that some of these really large, ambitious projects fail while some of these other types of projects succeed and they do it with far fewer resources? What's the difference? So I was introduced a little earlier. I've been in the data and analytics space. Again, my name is Mohammed Aaser. I'm Chief Data Officer here at Domo. I've been in the data analytics space now for the last decade. And I've had an opportunity to work in the financial services space with a number of different problems and solutions we built at McKinsey, and now at Domo with hundreds of our customers. And so I want to share some of those observations, but I also am very excited to have a panel of some friends of mine that are joining me today. Dion from Optum, Thomas Penning from Manulife, and Jordan Levine from MIT. And so I'd love to ask them to come on stage. We've got the high chairs now. And as we come on stage, maybe we'll just go around the group, and would be great if you could share a little bit about yourself each and some of the priorities that you're currently focused on. So we'll start with you first, Thomas.
Sure. So my name is Thomas Penning. I lead our global digital marketing, strategy planning, and MarTech organization within Manulife. I've been at Manulife for the past, I would say, 6 years. We operate as John Hancock here in the US, primarily around financial services, where we have a breadth of product and services that we're offering around the world. I'm on a very exciting journey, and back to Mohammed's point, where we're, I think, at an inflection point where we're trying to figure out what is the right balance between being a company A and a company B. And I've been fortunate to be in a company B situation in building our capability globally, but now I'm being asked to really scale it across all the various services and business lines that we have across the world. So my number one priority this year is really to build a team, right, and build the capabilities and services that will sustain and grow how we've been nimble and acting like a little startup, but with the funding of obviously a Fortune 500 company that goes behind, and then making sure that it's clearly understood how we have an impact directly into the P&L for what we call the segments, ultimately across the various geographies where we operate. And related to the reason why we're here today is, creating that relationship with the data office, right? It's important that we do get supported by a consortium of cross-functional teams that helps us scale across the organization.
Thank you, Stephen.
Hi, Steve Dion. I work at Optum, which is a very large healthcare delivery and health tech company under the banner of United Health Group. A lot of people think of United Healthcare when they think of Optum, although Optum is the place that has a very large what's called pharmacy benefit management solution called Optum Rx. So many of you probably get home delivery generic drugs that way. We also have a very large group of physician group practices, and that's the part of the business that my team is focused on. We are a business intelligence team. We've been at it now for about 6 years. We've had our ups and downs, but generally speaking, it's definitely been a growth story, a wonderful one. Really fostered on the back of an innovation play, right? So how could we go faster, cheaper, with better outcomes? That's been the story that my team has built itself upon over these last 6 years. And I'll say at this point in time, it has really become our number one asset, right? So as people think of, or as I have had time this week even to contemplate, what is my value proposition? What's the value prop that our solution provides? And it really is the team. It's the team. It's the team culture. It's the attitude. It's the ability to serve customers in a unique and differentiated way. That's our core asset. And so with so many moving parts in the world and within my giant conglomerate that this team fits within, how can we again get to the place where we are servicing the customers that really appreciate and harness our efforts going forward? And that's my key priority this year.
Excellent. Jordan?
Hi, everybody. My name is Jordan Levine. I'm a lecturer at the MIT Applied Business Analytics program. We'll explain that in a second. Let me first confess I'm a former management consultant, and in 2015, I delivered a massive Microsoft Excel file to a client. They were happy. The adjacent team served up something in R Shiny. I realized I was obsolete. I called my buddy Mohammed, who was at that point running the analytics practice at McKinsey, and I said, please hire me, and he did. I had like 2 weeks left on my clock, if you remember that. It was like literally 2 weeks. And with Mohammed, we ran the training function at McKinsey & Company, really focusing on a concept of analytics translators, which I think is pretty relevant to the company A and company B. And in 2020, I joined the MIT team, and where I focused there, we have 80 students, cohort of early tenure professionals doing a 12-month master's. One of my colleagues in the audience, Michelle, and we work with companies to identify capstone opportunities. So every year we're soliciting and working with the companies to scope a project where the students then deliver. So the majority of my time is focused on making sure the companies are going to get something they're happy with, given there's a price tag against this. And then working with the students to ensure they're really pushing the envelope, but making sure they're actually producing something that's going to be used once they leave, which is obviously a challenge in our field.
Excellent. Excellent. So what we'll do in the discussion, I'm going to be sharing a couple of observations that I've been seeing in the market, and then I'll be turning to our panelists for their insight and guidance. And so we'll continue on this journey in understanding what separates company A from company B. And so as I've been trying to wring my head around what is really driving this, we're breaking this conversation now up into two areas. The first is like, what's really driving that? And the first is, one of my key observations is that a lot of the innovation, a lot of the opportunities, whether it's what the right customer segments are, what are the plays we should be doing with like literally even the email campaigns, or even in our service groups or our HR teams, often it's coming from the edge. It's coming from the business practitioners. And so how do we bring them in? And then the second is an observation around the fact that many of us as an organization, we've invested millions in most cases in building an assembly line team. An assembly line is great for scale, but it turns out it's not great for innovation. And we'll look at what's happening across other industries on how they're tackling this problem. So the first is, as I kind of mentioned, was this innovation at the edge. And I think we often see this. We have our central data teams, and our central data teams are trying to prove value, show value, and so on. But often the business problems aren't occurring on the central team. The central team may have metadata management issues or governance problems, but often the business doesn't care about that. They care about the fact that, for example, in the supply chain, there's more out of stock. Or maybe on the operations side, that they're short-staffed and they need to do a better job managing their staffing levels, and so on and so forth. We see this all the time. The problems are often closest to the application, and that's where the value of data increases. Now, if we do a double click on the edge in most organizations, what we typically see is that the edge faces this, what I call a disjointed journey. And so what we often see is that they have this, what we call I call a desktop journey, which is we get extracts from different places. We use Excel. If we're ambitious enough, maybe we use another kind of desktop integration tool. Maybe we learn Tableau. We get some stuff. We put it into a PowerPoint. We email it around. There's a lot of sprawl. I think all of us probably have thousands. I mean, show of hands, is this common for the folks at the edge in your organization? I see a lot of heads nodding. Some of us have been even more ambitious and said, hey, we need to bring in the best of breed cloud tools for the edge. And what we're going to do is we're going to get a cloud data catalog. We're going to invest in a data warehouse, but we're going to make that data warehouse available to our business users. And we're going to get a cloud data integration tool. And we're going to, once they bring those data sets together, we're going to have them push it back into the data warehouse. And from there, they'll get another BI tool. They'll develop, and then they'll publish it to the BI server, and then they'll email around the links to that server file, and everybody's going to be working off the same data. How many people have been successful in doing this? They haven't, because the edge is not going to learn 4 different tools. And so what ends up happening is that they give up. They go back to the reporting team. They go back to the central team and they say, hey, I have a need, I have a problem. My staffing levels are low. You have a standard report, it's not good enough. I need something else. And what happens? They write a report, or they write a request. They send that request, and then they look at the title. Is this the VP, or is it just some analyst? Okay, it's a VP, let's prioritize it. They'll get it in 2 weeks. The VP gets the answer in 2 weeks, looks at it and says, hey, that's not exactly what I want. I need something slightly different. They go back, iterate a little bit. A couple weeks go by. A month later, they get an insight. And that's how most of our organizations run today. And then they email it around, by the way, once they get it. And the reality is that it turns, so that's one piece, right? So the edge is not empowered, and they have the problems, but they're not empowered. The second is that at its core, building a data and analytics solution, whether it's a customer 360 and you're doing segmentation on top of it, or a staffing solution, or cost optimization solution, often go through this life cycle. And the data value chain typically looks like connecting, ingesting to data, storing, querying it, integrating and analyzing it, visualizing, then actioning on top of it. And what I just want to draw your attention to a couple key stages that make data and analytics solutions highly different than others, right? The first is that when we get to that stage where we're integrating and analyzing data, often we get new insights. When we get those new insights, it often leads to new hypotheses. Those new hypotheses often lead to needing more data. And then you have to go back, once you need more data, go back to the beginning of the data value chain and say, hey, can you connect more data? In the same case, once you start visualizing the data, same things happen. Business stakeholders start having more questions. I wonder if our staffing level issues are worse in areas that don't have good public transportation. Well, now we need to get data on public transportation. We need to feed that back in. So you rerun and based on those hypotheses. And then once you've got these great analyses, and we're all familiar with this, we get all those great analyses together. Then the next thing we want to do is actually make sure that, in this like staffing example, we want to make sure that our business stakeholders are actually using the staffing solution on a day-to-day basis. It turns out we throw it over the fence often to a software engineering team, say, hey, we got you the data, now go build the app to get this, or here's a dashboard, and maybe use that. And so it turns out that when you build a data solution, it requires a high degree of iteration. In fact, it requires, I would argue, double the amount of iteration than a traditional software workflow-based solution. And why is that? Because the whole data analytics process in itself is highly iterative and hypothesis-driven, and you don't know what you don't know until you get to that stage. You do that first stage, and then the second stage is that you actually have to build the workflow and the actual app, which is the traditional software workflow lifecycle. So you got both of these. Now juxtapose this whole process of building a data and analytics solution with how we have built our teams. We have built teams across the data value chain with specialized tools in every single part of the data value chain with specialized roles. So you have someone who's specialized in building data connections. You have someone who's specialized in managing the data warehouse and building data tables. You have someone who's specialized in building data pipelines. You have someone who's specialized in data science, a data scientist. You then got a BI engineer to go build a front end. Then you've got an app developer to go build the workflows and the transaction processing system and so on. Oh, and by the way, you have data stewards as well, and governance experts, and you got security experts too. So if you want to go build a solution like the staffing solution that I was mentioning before, it can take 6 to 12 months easily to even get to a point of where you can show a POC with value. Again, outside of Excel. And it's because of all these dependencies and all the bottlenecks through the process. And so inherently, data and analytics projects require a high degree of agility, but our production model, the way we operationalize it, the way we built our teams, are often the problem. And so let's look at the automobile industry, right? And by the way, I call this, the model that we just walked through, I call this the assembly line model. We've built these assembly lines. Now, as we know, the automotive industry Ford created the assembly line model. At least they've taken credit for it, as far as I know, right? And in reality, the assembly line was designed for scale, right? Ford has a vision. They need to create hundreds of thousands of a Mach-E, and they needed to do it at the lowest possible price, and they need to do it with the highest possible quality. And how they do it is they break up every single step. They have specialized staff, but also specialized machinery, and they get really good at those individual tasks. You string it together, and you get a great solution. But it turns out that the Ford Mach-E or a new Ford car was never designed on the assembly line. In fact, Ford has a separate team. They have an innovation team. And they start with customer research. They start with 3D designs and renderings. They move to clay models. They move to wind speed tests, right? They find different suppliers. They go validate. And then they mature that. They mature it. They have a process by which, once they're at the point where they know they can scale this, they move it to the assembly line. They get the assembly line ready to mass produce it. And so if you think about the auto industry, where they're maybe launching 1 or 2 cars, an individual manufacturer maybe launching 1 or 2 cars a year, or maybe doing 1 or 2 refreshes a year, versus our digital and data and analytics teams, is an order of magnitude difference in terms of how much more we need to innovate than they do. And they've figured it out. And so the question is, for us, is how do we build that model so we can be more productive? What does that productivity ultimately look like, right? And so when you think about taking a data and analytics project and taking it through the assembly line, you can talk about teams of 5 to 10 people. And perhaps it can be even larger. I didn't even add in project managers here. And you assemble and put together these tools, and you try to bring folks in from all these specialized teams. But then when you go and move to more of this innovation model, you have a much smaller team, more integrative, and closer to the business. And you focus on quicker sprints, integrated tooling, and the productivity benefits I've seen myself in building out these solutions, anywhere from 2 to 3x just on the people side, and 3 to 4x in terms of the time. And so on average, anywhere from 5 to 10x productivity improvements to get to that initial stage of value. So with that, I want to turn to our panel. I know I went through quite a few materials. And I'd love to just, I talked about 2 topics. One was around engaging with the edge, where the innovation comes from. I'm interested to hear, where do the new ideas come from in your organization? I'd love to hear any examples as well.
I'll start by saying that my team has very much a sort of product mindset with respect to innovation. We look at it 2 ways. One is we do have an active pipeline through a traditional product management tool that queues up requests directly from our customers, right? From our customers and our prospective customers. These things are then put into a prioritized roadmap and queue. The other much more relevant space that we have found on our team is that in a traditional, what's called scaled agile framework process, my team sets aside 2 weeks every quarter for pure innovation. And by that I mean we ask individuals on the team, and this goes for everyone from me on down to even say the project manager on the team, to choose a particular activity or 2 that they would like to try out as part of their innovation sprint. And it's really out of that we've been able to realize the biggest value from an innovation standpoint. And one that comes to mind for us locally is that within United Health Group, which as many know what conglomerates are, it's really a conglomeration of 5,000 underlying acquisitions over the past 40 years. And as you can imagine, as you go from one transactional system to the other, the names of those organizations are not always well understood, and or one may be a Pro Health Physicians, another may say PHP, right? So I had a data engineer who decided that she thought that this was a great place to plug in some Python and iterate on that and see if we could normalize the names of the organizations across our wide, expansive network. And wouldn't you know it, she had an initial hypothesis. The initial code was terrible, right? But we were able to iterate on it, and over time, within, I would say about a 2-month period of time, we had a working model that was starting to show real value. And now, as people are going in to the various analyses that the team, and other teams, by the way, who are also using this because we have a reuse over rebuild mentality, people as they're building dashboards, it's the same name of the org every time, every dashboard, and it makes a huge difference.
That's a pretty interesting, and that's like your own data team is basically innovating themselves on top of it.
I think I'll piggyback on what Stephen just said, and I think innovation definitely resides where the business impact is, right? At the end of the day, I grew my career at Manulife for the past 6 years, where I was buried in one of the business line, and I understand really intimately the product and services that we sell under our investment management umbrella. Yet now I have a coverage that's around the globe and different geographies, and we serve up multiple products and services. And I'm not as knowledgeable, right, about all those products and services, markets, and differences that are happening within there. So it's important to rely on what the business needs is. I'd say on the other end, though, now we're able to apply innovation based on learnings that we have within a business, let's say our Manulife investment management, retail business in the US, and apply that for a Canadian market, right? So there's some sort of innovation that also lies within the center when you can repurpose either operational models that you've created in terms of innovating, or product and services that can be, repurposed across geographies or business lines.
So Thomas, you mentioned that you were you grew up in the business, you were close to it, and now you don't know all the different parts, obviously. How do you stay close? How do you stay close to the business, or how do you enable those folks that are closest to the business to actually kind of come up with these ideas?
Yeah, a word that I tend to overuse, I think, is being comfortable with ambidexterity, right? It's important to understand in a hub and spoke model, and I'm currently at that inflection point as I'm growing the team, trying to figure out what is the right way to provide the services, the delivery services for the rest of the organization in terms of marketing technologies, data pipelines, engineering, and how do we work with data offices across the various geographies. What I mean by that is being comfortable in understanding what's happening at the edge without really feeling that has an impact in the direction that you're taking within the hub, I would say, at the center. And it's being comfortable with that ambidexterity where sometimes it feels like they're not going in the same direction, but that's okay, right? It's that mix between being comfortable being in a company A, but also sustaining the company B model where you're able to rapidly innovate and finding the right set of tools that enables you to do that.
Are there any kind of stories around where you've seen this happen pretty well? And this goes for the entire group, by the way, of where you've seen, I think, Stephen, you shared an example on your data team, but also just on the edges where you've seen innovation happen.
Well, it happens well when you have, I think, flexibility and freedom, right? As you grow, I think everyone can attest that there's more scrutiny, yet your budget is growing, right? But with the spend and the budget that is growing, there's also more scrutiny and eyeballs and more leadership, right? That goes into that. So, I've seen it in my past. I haven't seen it in a while, I'd say, because of where we are in our journey in building that assembly line and making sure that we build the assembly line in a way that still allows us to be working with our right hand and still innovate and keep that innovation hub that can then, rapidly provide solutions that have an impact to the P&L. And that's the environment that I'm in. Working in financial services, it's important that we keep an eye on the financial impact that we have on the organization.
Excellent. Okay, so also a question on operating models. Do you make a distinction within your organization between an assembly line and an innovation engine? And maybe Jordan, interested in your view, obviously you're slightly different than the rest. I mean, what type of operating model do you typically use?
Yeah, to address the operating model in the previous question as well, like where do good ideas come from? So I think in terms, let me say this, I've been in academia for 3 years now. At first I thought it was very slow, but because there's a fixed cadence, I've managed to kind of build a process where it's much faster. And so I think in terms of design, build, maintain. Okay, between August and the first Monday of January is design. And I am working with companies to create good ideas. Build, then we put students, that's 2 FTE you could think about, from February to August, and then they produce, they build, and then from there, hopefully they turn a product over and it has to be maintained. So design, build, maintain. I have infinite capacity and interest in discussing design because I don't put any work into it. It's just free thinking and discussion.
You don't see it as work, at least, right?
I don't, but I don't let anything go from design to build until essentially there are like 3 things satisfied. You can state what it is in 1 sentence. You have a prototype, like something you've showed a business stakeholder who says, I would use that. And then there is a data set that's curated. And if these 3 things are met with 80% certainty, the project will be successful. But if these 3 things are not met, then I don't let it graduate into build. So this is the innovation side, or the fast, because it's 2 students, right?
Yeah.
But design, build, maintain, I live by it. The design, like I said, it's all talk. But don't let any work be done until there's a product for somebody to react to.
So you do more than just talk then, right? Because you're getting the sentence, you're getting some of the data, you're getting actually the model.
Yes, but that's usually really easy to do once you're serious.
Okay.
Once you're serious about, I want to grow I want to convert my lead conversion to customers by 20%. That's a sentence that's very easy. I'm going to take Teradata and the other things you talked about and link 5 different tools. I tune out in the design phase because it's just not relevant.
Okay, and Stephen, how about you? Do you have an assembly line op model, or is there something also that Jordan mentioned that resonated with you?
Yeah, something that came to mind is another bit of innovation thing that happened on my team was, and I think this results from just good, trustworthy, reliable, and I would say smart work. When you have a customer who has trusted you in something sort of generic, in our case, it was sort of, hey, what's the value that we're getting out of this particular asset that his team had managed, very large data warehousing thing in healthcare. There's an edge use case that required us to really think quickly as to how might we enable a capability to surface some much needed information, in this case, which patients of the practices had been admitted to the emergency department and had been discharged the next day. And the reason why this was relevant and why it continues to be relevant in healthcare is that the ability to catch that patient at that critical juncture of transition. So when they're coming out of the hospital, obviously there's something pretty bad that happened, and the cost of the care of that person is much more likely to go up if you don't catch and then address some of those gaps in care in a very rapid time frame. So out of this use case was born a somewhat of a tiger team approach, if you would, that my team was fortunate enough to get called, right? And how might we do something on their behalf to iterate in this direction in a very rapid cycle time frame? They wanted to know timing. We said, I don't know, 3 to 4 months. We got on the project, and 5 weeks later, we had the first version, and it's been a terrific ride since then. Something that has scaled up over time, something that has now become, I would say, an enterprise capability. One that I think a lot of people didn't think this team or the platform we were on was capable of doing. So just a tremendous success story, but one again that I attribute to the foundation of everything we do, which is, again, trust, reliability, and quality, right? That's the third element I kind of forgot to mention before. Those 3 things, you need those before you get some of these cool, innovative things to work on. But luckily we did, and that's where we are.
And you have a sizable team. I mean, do you have a split? This project that you talked about, where you went and developed this solution in 5 weeks, saw impact, was that using your assembly line? Was that, you mentioned the Tiger team, but do you have an assembly line in addition to your Tiger team? Do you see them as separate, or are they separate operating models, or are they kind of all co-mixed and it just happened out of luck?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of resources that are more geared toward, I would say, the innovation space, the rapid iteration thing, but then in order to take advantage really of the breadth of the org, we're all tightly integrated. So those people also are doing stuff on the assembly line, but they know, and their main interests they've made clear to me and their managers on the team. Hey, we want to be on the cutting edge of things. This is my skill set. This is what I'm trying to improve upon. And so guess what? If I don't give them those opportunities, chances of me keeping them long term and wringing the value out of them that we can is next to none.
So there's a way, even if you don't have an innovation, separate operating team for innovation, you can still pull some folks out and dedicate them to this, make sure that their responsibilities on the assembly line are filled by other folks.
True. And roughly 10% of my team today is involved with innovation at any point in time. And that remains pretty consistent.
Excellent. Okay, so we're going to continue this discussion. I'm going to share a couple more, some more observations and then get guidance from the group as well. So one of the big questions that comes up is, how do you actually set up this operating model? How do you set up an operating model to enable both the assembly line and the innovation? And we heard a couple of different ways that this has been done. And then the second piece is, how do you actually get the right tooling to make this happen as well? So on the innovation process itself, I talked about the assembly line and the innovation model, but I actually think, going back to that point around the edge, where the ideas come from, is how do you in fact enable ad hoc analytics? How do you enable the business teams to truly have access to those relevant data sets, to go do that on the last mile, if you will, come up and hypothesize, take their different problems, test and learn pretty rapidly. And here you're empowering the business analysts and the functional experts, and you're giving them low-code, no-code tools to really go and learn quickly and get outside of Excel hell, if you will. On the second phase, though, is as they have ideas that are worthy of merit to the point where you could scale them up further, and they require potentially changing behaviors, creating workflows, maybe doing more data science work, more data integrations that are needed. How do you promote that to the innovation team to basically go say, hey, let's take that and let's really figure out how we can scale it up and continue to test and learn on that idea. And that's where you start to say, we have a small interdisciplinary team, and they need an integrated development platform so they can go do this relatively rapidly. And then once they've tested and vetted that solution, they've shown the value from it, they say, if it warrants it, let's promote that to the assembly line. And once promoted to the assembly line, this is the whole idea of designing a new car, but then now we need to mass produce 500,000 of these cars. The assembly line can do that efficient scale up, cost management, quality management, and so on. And in practice, these are my own estimates, right? And they can vary. I'd be interested in the group's view also on how these estimates might vary. But if you view a world where maybe 80 to 90% of your use cases that just create value in your organization, right, may come from the ad hoc analytics space where you have business users who have different problems, whether it's that staffing problem, whether it's out of stock, whether it's looking at how different data is connected to help improve the supply chain. And then 5 to 10% actually, some portion get promoted to this innovation team, right? And they can live at a stage where they create value, but they don't really need to be scaled up that much. But a handful of those actually get scaled up, maybe to tens of thousands of users. Maybe they go external commercially. You're building a new business off of it. And that's where you actually need to promote to the assembly line. And so, creating a stage gating process to basically say, how do you move from an ad hoc kind of solution to an innovation shop to the assembly line? And maybe, these are some of the things, at least that I've seen, where perhaps you have hundreds of users, right? So that ad hoc solution maybe was used by 5, 10 users. Maybe you need to go to hundreds of users. In that case, promote it to the innovation team because they're going to actually build a better user experience. Or maybe you need more data integration that you don't have, that the ad hoc team can't do. And so you need that data engineering expertise, and maybe we need workflows and apps built. But then from that innovation side, when you get to that point where you're scaling beyond hundreds to maybe thousands of users, it's mission critical, it's highly if it goes down, it could be very costly for the business. There's a lot of risk potential as well. And maybe you need specialized tech. Maybe you need, unstructured data management and, the tooling that your ad hoc team or your even innovation team, they don't have available. That specialized team may have available, and you can productionalize at that scale. And I want to give an example, at least a journey that I've seen, right, to bring this a little bit to life. This is a leading retailer. And they had this problem where this was actually found by one of their operations analysts. This operations analyst, highly, highly entrepreneurial culture. Store managers at every single store, and they have, I think, thousands of stores, could actually set different planograms, could choose different products, could even adjust pricing and promotions and so on. And what he observed was that everybody's really entrepreneurial, everybody's focused on the sales metrics, but it turns out that a lot of their operations is highly variable, and I think their lack of operational discipline is actually slowing them down from being able to sell more. And so basically, you can't outrun a bad diet, right? He's like, how can I get them to have a better operational discipline? Because I think they'll grow. So this analyst, interviewed and was in the business, right? Completely in the business with the retail stores, and mapped out all of the different metrics from an operational perspective that the managers need to see. Things like staffing levels, inventory levels, CSAT, sales, all that good stuff. And he started to actually build a lot of these views in an ad hoc way himself and built the pipelines. And he convinced his leadership that I think this is something that we need to scale up to all of our store managers. So this was just an idea he had. He started showing it to leadership and sharing it with a couple managers. What ended up happening is an innovation team was spun up. This wasn't common for the company, but they spun up a team just to focus on this problem. And they built a solution in 6 weeks. They integrated 40 different data sources, Snowflake tables, New Relic, Medallia, Excel spreadsheets, data from Workday and so on. And then they launched the first version of this app to 3 stores. And in that process, they iterated several times after that 6 weeks for the next, I think, 3 months. How does this need to look? What other data should we add? So on and so forth. And what they started expanding out from 3 stores to more stores as well. And what they found was that for those initial stores, the 3 plus the next cohort, they found that their top line sales on average had increased by over 5%. And that built the case to basically say, we need to scale this up. And then obviously leadership saw this, were super excited about it, and they scaled it up. They hardened the data pipelines. They created a separate environment for production. And they got everything set up so they could launch to all their stores. And now they're over 1,000 stores. It's been a huge impact on the business. And so this is an example of seeing this life cycle kind of play out through and through. And so the other piece too is around tooling. And I'd be remiss if I missed the point around how Domo enables this, right? So I'm with Domo, and I at McKinsey, while I was at McKinsey, also built out many solutions, and I see many of our customers. And so when I talk about the fact that we need to support this innovation process, we also need to enable it with the right tooling as well. And we need to enable it for both the ad hoc use cases, but also for those experiences where you need to engineer solutions as well. And so if you think about the data value chain, we spend so much time stitching together different tools. What happens with Domo is that you've got all those capabilities under the hood. And what that enables you to do is to bring in data from all of these different data sources very rapidly, to store it, to query it, to manage it, even for thousands of user scale, to be able to integrate, bring in your data science, or even drag and drop kind of integration like you might do in an Alteryx-like tool. And now with our AI services layer, even bring LLMs in as well, to visualize it, but then also go beyond standard visualizations, bring your own JavaScript front ends, and then even build full apps, React apps with read-write, with workflows, all while managing security and lineage. And so now that whole ad hoc analytics and that whole innovation cycle can be sped up, and the pieces that need to be promoted to production, to the assembly line, can be using the tools that make the most sense. So I want to go back to our panel here, and just a couple of questions for you. Do you have a process by which you stage gate, where you move between these different levels, or a process by which you kill projects?
Well, I'll answer the last one. Usually the P&L is the one that kills the project, right? Or the decision is often made way above, my area of control.
Let me ask a little bit pointed question. You said the P&L, so does it bleed out? Is it until people leave? Is it like, what happens?
Well, I think at the end of the day, you have to understand how are you positively, right, at the end of the day, impacting the business. Are you contributing to net earnings, right? Ultimately, we're all striving within each of the companies, being public or not, to grow the portfolio of the company that you're working on. So I think thinking about projects that way, and maybe an example that I can share, Mohammed, that ties a little bit into the example you shared with the retailer. I'm in marketing, so the question that I got 6 years ago from a chief marketing officer is, and it's kind of a saying is, I know that half of the budget that I have is working, I just don't know which half. So when you spend money, which that's what you do in marketing, you want to make sure that the money that you actually spend, you talk about ROIs, the return on the advertisement, spending that you have, is actually yielding a return in terms of qualifying leads, right? That's my business. I'm in the business in generating qualified leads for the entire organization, and the team kind of supports that. So leveraging your example is, well, there's data that's being generated in this ecosystem. Every single person here in the room, generates data points with your fingers as you go on the web. Every single of those touch points are being collected, but they're stored in all those various different platforms. So the first thing was to, maintain and have a tool that allows us to have APIs that connect into all those different platforms. I'm not a data engineer. I'm not in the business in hiring data engineers either, but I did it myself, right? And I don't have a computer science background or writing any JavaScript. So I think that was kind of, you got to dangle the carrot in front of the donkey in order to start getting the appetite. I think that's really important, thinking that way, especially in bigger companies, to then get, I would say, the investment that's required to start building your innovation hub. that's the journey that I'm on right now. And I'm a startup, I got seed investment, now I'm seeking Series A. That's the build of the assembly line, right? And I think that's really important. Always keeping an eye on the P&L, making sure that what you're doing is not bleeding out ultimately your budget and your portfolio.
We kill things based upon 3 measurements, and we do it regularly. So I make each one of you think of them as product owners, but I call them domain leads. So for each individual sort of set of analytics that we have, I've got a person who's in that lead role. And that's a bit of a cross between a data analyst, business analyst, right? So they're doing some engineering, but they also own the relationship to the customer. And what I, as the leader, make them do is to have a monthly review with each of their key customers. And there are 3 things that they talk about at these meetings. The first is utility. What, if anything, have you gained from the use of said asset here since the last time we met? In many cases, there's not a lot to report because oftentimes, we're underway with a build or some new improvement. So perhaps it's the same old, which generally it should be good. The second piece is usage, right? So how many unique users and what is the total footprint of how often people are using it? There are some sort of standard markers by which, dashboards are rated for failure. And in our case, it's something like less than a user a day, right? That has gone into it. That's oftentimes not a problem, but you'd be surprised about how many assets out there that you have do not meet that particular threshold. And then the last piece of something that either looks like either a kill or keep is the backlog, right? So what is it that we are doing moving ahead to iterate and to change and or to grow that particular capability where the client is going to get increased value? So looking at those 3 things, honestly, the fourth part of the conversation is, okay, what if anything that we have today under management or under sort of support deserves to be killed? Because let's face it, we don't have time for everything, and there's some old stuff that deserves to be cut. So that's sort of a systematic approach that we use, and I feel the more transparent we are with our customers, the more they're gonna put their trust in us.
I'd say I'd add a quick point, because at the end of the day, we can't do any of this if you don't find the right solutions, but also the right partners. And it works like a marriage, right? You have to hold each other accountable to ultimately what vendors, third-party partners are bringing on to the table. And oftentimes, in pretty big companies, it's a partnership and kind of marriage that slowly dies over time. And once that executive rips the Band-Aids, that's really painful. When you see infrastructure that has been, building out within the organization, and we were just talking prior to the panel, I won't name the vendor, but we have dozens and dozens of instances that have been built, and now we're in a predicament. We're not getting anything out of it, and we can't scale. It can't be moved to the assembly line. So it's important to hold each other accountable as well, and that's one of the ways also that you kill projects, right?
I talked a little bit about tooling. I'm interested in your point of view, assembly line versus the innovation, the ad hoc process. Does tooling matter? Does it make a difference?
Yes. In my MIT capacity, a good project, a good data set, we expect the students to learn over time. But the evolution of what they deliver is rapidly changing. So a couple of years ago, it was a poster and a simple presentation. It's now a dashboard is essentially table stakes. In my independent consulting capacity, I have a project due in the first week of August. I sleep fine knowing it'll be delivered because of the Domo Everywhere button. I think it's novel technology. You can produce an app like overnight. I don't know if you call it an app, but it looks functionable enough. So the tooling is fast. The deliverables and expectations will change as the tooling it comes fast. And the open question in my mind is, in the 80s, Microsoft, you had spreadsheet specialists, right? They were the experts in spreadsheets. Microsoft Excel won out. I think we're going to get to that world. I think we're all going to be data scientists at one point once the right tooling is here. And the open question is who and when.
Maybe a saying that I use all the time, because I'm responsible for marketing technology stack is, at the end of the day, technologies are enablers to us, humans, right? And our ability to interact and drive, again, revenue down to the P&L. So it's important to understand the ecosystem, right? And why a lot of people do attend conferences, so you can stay abreast of industry changes. But finding the right solution that ultimately enables you in your particular function, and then that ties back directly to the business needs.
In our case, I would say it all gets down to speed, right? And one of our core sayings on my team is speed over perfection, right? In order to drive speed, you cannot be dogmatic about each and every piece of the puzzle, right? You need the majority of the pieces of the pie available to you so that you can run more quickly, hopefully succeed faster, right? I know there's another word that people also use in data exploration, but in our case, how can we get to that milestone, if you would, of proceed or kill? And for us, it's, hey, whatever tooling has the best connections to do the majority of the things we need in a project, that's the one that we're going to use. Just so happens that it's been Domo for the last 6 years, and our team has had really good results. But yeah, speed over perfection.
Well, I know we have only a couple minutes left. I want to do a couple of key takeaways, right, just for the group. I know we went through a lot. The first one is just assembly line was not made for innovation, but that doesn't mean we don't need the assembly line. We actually need both. We need an assembly line process as well as an innovation operating model. Getting the right tooling does matter. And then if you get this right, you can see 5 to 10x impact in your outcomes, quality, and speed. And I want to end with maybe just a quick example of The Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci. I was in Italy 2 weeks ago, and I was really struck by this. This masterpiece, right, one of da Vinci's best pieces of work, what's really interesting about it is that it didn't use the typical fresco style. In fact, across from it is a painting that was done in fresco. It turns out fresco dries very rapidly within an hour. You can't change it, you can't iterate it, you're stuck with it. And da Vinci said, you know what? I want to create a masterpiece, and I want to keep the ability to iterate and change it. And so he used another style. He used something called the tempera style, a different material. And what it allowed him to do was to work on this over time, adapt his thinking, and come up with the masterpiece that we've seen today. And so that's why I think, again, this underscores the importance of ensuring that some of the best masterpieces that we have, they only come after we've given our teams, ourselves, the ability and the tooling to go iterate rapidly, continue to learn and develop. And again, I think that's what we need for our data teams. So we have just a couple more minutes. We can take a couple of questions, maybe 2.
Questions for the audience?
This question is for Steven, but you mentioned that you had some data analysts that are domain kind of leaders. And do those data analysts still work for all the domains, or are they kind of siloed? Because we currently have kind of siloed analysts, but we'd like them to work on all the domains. I was just wondering what your thought was on that.
Most of them are siloed, right? They become sort of SMEs in that respective kind of vertical domain. So in our case, it may be something like help desk domain, or it may be clinical data domain. There are other people on the team who are horizontal players, people who are specialists at connecting to maybe custom APIs, for example, people who have a little better knowledge, specific technical knowledge that's really handy on that. Same holds true for a number of our enabling functions on the team, things that I call security, governance, and enablement. All of those are horizontal functions on my team and go across all the domains.
I prefer the word embedded than silos. Supporting, you're embedded in the business.
So, Steven, would you say your folks are embedded?
No, I wouldn't say that at all.
Okay. I want to have at least some healthy debate.
No, we're a shared service,
Okay.
is what we are.
Any other questions?
you have any insights on funding models? That's all. Sorry. Any insights on the funding models for both kinds of frameworks?
I mean, I'll reiterate. It ties to the mission, right? The mission of my team is to generate qualified leads by, personalizing the experience of our customers online, right? We own the entire digital journey, basically. We're still a heavily B2B, also, business when you think about, investment products that we sell through intermediaries, or, it depends. In Canada, we have direct-to-consumer, insurance products, but it has to tie to that. So at the end of the day, in marketing, we talk about value funnel, right? So how do you create performance uplift through the value funnel that ultimately drives into revenue, right? So we've built a framework that allows us to support the impact to the earnings, and that's how we seek funding, right? Everything is tied back to the P&L.
You've actually created, correct me if I'm wrong, you've created a model where you're actually tying every lead generally to revenues, and you're taking credit for some of the revenues, and that's actually being used to fund the innovation that you're going and doing. And so you've got this whole economic model that you've spent quite a bit of time building to support it.
Oh yeah, I'm working my way back up, right now, and trying to get it better. But that's really important, because now I have a platform that allows me to talk about other delivery services that we want to provide, right, within our ecosystem. And we don't have to be the best everywhere, right? It really depends on the industry that you're in. But that has been, I think, a pivotal moment, and also very exciting for me, because as within the creation of that center of excellence or shared service, over a year and a half ago, prior to that, I was hitting a plateau. There was just no additional funding that I could get within the business, right? So it's important to find that model.
We've had a slightly different approach, and it's not a direct answer to your question. It's a bit of a segue. We found that there are a lot of people who are interested in utilizing a tool, right, on their own, and potentially using some of the assets that our team had built from a sort of data dictionary standpoint. So these sort of collections of domain data, and then, hey, can you make it accessible to us? So we came up with a new innovative go-to-market that we call Dashboard It Yourself, right? And in the Dashboard It Yourself, it's really a package of acceleration services where we imbue upon them the critical importance of keeping data secure, governed, and then a proper enablement channel. But then we arm them with a kind of an arm-in-arm. Think of it as like a pair programming first use case that we deliver in 1 month's time. So they go from literally sourcing their data to be able to produce a in-production dashboard that is reviewed, peer-reviewed, and/or reviewed against standards, all within 2 sprints. So something that we've found tremendous value going back to the business. We've been ascribing a 3x value proposition to that offering. So for every month of funding, it gives the business 3 months in return.
Maybe 2 takeaways I'm taking. One is that's how you're empowering the edge. You're actually taking this package, you're empowering the edge, you've done this, and you've got an economic model where the edge is actually paying for you to provide this service to them. Okay, very cool.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you everyone.